Hi, I'm Corey, and I have too many tapes. But first, right off the bat, before I get into the video, I have to say that I've started a second channel called Too Many Tapes, that's TWO Many Tapes, where I'm uploading some of these rarer and harder to find VHS tapes I discuss because what's the use in talking about something nobody has seen or can see? Go subscribe to that, and subscribe to this channel here while you're at it, if you haven't or don't. I'm not your dad. So, hi, I'm Corey, and I also have too many channels. Corey, you have to stop dunking on the power team. No, I'm sorry, but it's easy, and they're stupid. Maybe spending too much time on TikTok these days? For those of you maybe just joining me, I'll give you a quick rundown of these beef preachers, or you can watch my previous video about them here or there. One of these days I have to figure that out. Anyway, in the 1980s, a Southern minister managed to combine all of the most intoxicating elements of American gladiators, professional wrestling, carny hucksterism, and big tent revivals into a terrifyingly captivating spectacle called John Jacobs and the Power Team. The premise was simple. A bunch of yoked dudes would show up to your school, rip some phone books in half, blow up some hot water bottles, and talk about not doing drugs and staying in school. They'd then tell you to come to their real show at the Civic Center or at a megachurch later in the week. In that later show, they do even bigger stunts, punching through giant stacks of ice, giant stacks of concrete blocks, giant stacks of flaming concrete blocks, snapping baseball bats, and more. A lot of it was, if not exactly fake, gimmicked, to use a wrestling term. These guys were strong, yeah, really strong. Stronger than me. I am a weak boy, soft boy, flabby computer boy, little baby man. But this burly wind-up was all for the sake of their real pitch, converting people to Christianity, driving those converts to the churches that hosted them, and making a bunch of money in the process to continue their crusade/multimedia empire. Crass oversimplification? Maybe. But the way Jacobs fused his fundamentalist, theocratic, misogynist views with capitalist ambition and uniquely American spectacle was pretty crass too, so, fire with fire, I guess. Again, if you want my full, well-researched, and sweatily impassioned take on the Power Team, go watch my earlier video. It's before I had a teleprompter to help me out, so I was trying to recite and memorize chunks of a script in front of hot video lights in the middle of a blazing southern summer with no AC on so I could get a clean sound recording. Did I mention I was very sweaty? It has big Richard Nixon in the first televised presidential debate vibes. As grifters go, these guys were some of the griftiest, and their media empire was vast. They had their own show on TBN called The Power Connection, their own music CD, their own series of comic books, and they even released a myriad of VHS puff pieces documenting their grand success around the world. Today we're looking at one of the rarer and more obscure VHS tapes of theirs. It's a piece from 1987 called John Jacobs and Power, The Cutting Edge, a formula of deceit, suicide, which, that's a mouthful to say. It's a 15-minute sermon interspersed with the Power Team in a remote studio performing some very tall stunts set to a veritable jukebox of unlicensed pop and rock hits of the 80s. This tape is very motivational in its tone, or it aspires to be motivational, and the presentation is slick and shiny in a low-budget sort of way. It's also muddled and meandering, a strange combination of inert and insidious, lifeless and enthusiastic, absolutely harmless and totally toxic. It's a hungry cobra in an ornate suitcase. But it also highlights the strange way John Jacobs approaches spreading the message of Jesus, because there's not a lot of God in this tape, if I'm being honest. It's mostly just John. It's a fundamentally incomplete package. Let's put a pin in that one. So it's time to dip my toe into the Power Team yet again. I bring this on myself. Let's talk about John Jacobs and Power, The Cutting Edge, a formula of deceit, suicide, or if I have to refer to the title at all ever again, a formula of deceit, because it's easier to say and that's what it says in the title card of the video itself. But before we get started in earnest, a quick content warning here. This video starts off with a lot of talk about suicide, so if you don't want to hear me discuss the contents of this one, this might not be the video for you. Anyway, the first thing you notice in this video, which I've made available on my second channel, is how awkwardly staged everything is. John Jacobs is in a lonely studio on top of some apple boxes in front of a rising sun motif and some busted cinder blocks arranged in an artful pile of calculated destruction. We hold on his face as he stares directly into the screen to deliver his sermon. He just keeps on staring. He's kind of good at delivering right into the barrel of the lens. He just stares you down, right into your soul. Sorry, force of habit. But the camera can't take it. We have to move away from John. We keep cutting to different angles shot through the broken cinder blocks, and each angle is sillier than the last. Jacobs never looks away from that A camera though. I imagine if he glimpsed through that cinder block at us, even for an instant, we'd all be immediately turned to ash. He's talking a lot about suicide and throwing out some wild-sounding statistics here. Teen suicide was heavily on the rise in the 80s and 90s, it's true. Jacobs seems to want to connect it to a sense of general moral decay or a self-esteem crisis, the same kind of rock and roll devil music argument that a lot of Southern preachers go for, but it's oddly generic here. Unspecific, formless, lacking teeth. Side note, if the moral panic argument were the case, we would have seen a higher suicide rate in major quote-unquote troubled urban areas, big cities, places of concentrated secular culture. But that wasn't really the case in the 80s and 90s. The rise in teen suicide was heavily concentrated in far-flung rural areas, states with low populations and little connection to the mainstream secular culture purportedly infecting the youth of America. And Jacobs' framing is kind of gross, even for 1987. He has a weird, compassionless compassion, if that makes sense. He has compassion for the living kids, sure, the ones he can use as points and examples to explain how effective his motivational speaking is. But the ones who actually go through with it, they gave up. They're quitters.
One young lady handed me a letter. She said, "This is for you." And I read the letter. It was a beautiful poem. The sad thing was, it was about how she was going to hang herself in the backyard. You know what? So many young people today are giving up and quitting.
It's cruel on his end and completely oblivious to the emotional needs of teens. He relates to them on the level of a bad middle school PE teacher that sees things in terms of winners and losers. He might also teach civics, who knows. Jacobs has no interest in the actual root cause of the epidemic. He's already come to his own conclusion, or four conclusions really, and is trying to put everything into a neat box that he can categorize and pathologize without having to engage with any human being on a person-to-person level. Thankfully though, this video isn't all just John Jacobs barreling the lens and yakking. There's also Beef Boys breaking blocks and bricks! And break they do, but in a bizarre, sterile way. We don't see an audience, but it's implied that they're there through some lackadaisical or possibly canned cheering, but it's all in that weird studio void. In fact, the whole structure of this thing can't help but recall a lot of the early 80s wrestling shows where you'd have a bunch of pre-recorded promos stitched together with matches that took place in some sweaty-looking industrial warehouse where they would do the tapings. It may have all been happening in the same room, but it almost feels like two different universes. But something else is here in the Power Team studio as these buff dudes do the big stunts. Something to fill the void. It's almost certainly unlicensed 80s pop music, and not even the Christian kind, just straight up Harold Faltermeyer's Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop themes, and Eye of the Goddang Tiger. And what better cherry to top that unlicensed music Sunday than John Jacobs' constant time-filling sideshow barking to distract you from the fact that while these feats of strength are visually mesmerizing, they're mostly unimpressive as genuine feats of strength. Let's just say that those little gaps in between the slabs of concrete are doing a lot of the work. Not that I could break even one of them, but you don't need to be able to do a suplex to know that wrestling is scripted, you know? A lot of wrestling talk in this episode. I may have a problem. I need help. This is all to say that I can't really play any clips of the feats of strength with sound, lest the YouTube gods rain their unholy torment down upon me, collapsing me like an infinitely dominoing tower of cinder blocks. But that doesn't mean we can't watch the Beef Boys break the blocks in the background while I talk, which we've been doing this whole time, and here I am now explaining that, just stalling for time. Gotta stretch that script, baby. It's hard to not enjoy the feats, though. There's a dopey charm to watching enormous dudes just plowing through concrete with their heads. It's neat. I'm a simple man. Blocks go pow, I go wow. There are 3 of these segments. They're the candy. If we're good little boys and girls and we listen to John's fake stories, we all get to see the big guy break a brick, or rip a phone book. But to get to the candy, we gotta eat our vegetables. And John Jacobs has broken teens as a whole down into 4 categories. All teens, every teen is one of these 4 kinds of people, and 3 out of the 4 are potential suicide victims. You got cop-outs, holdouts, dropouts, and all-outs. As buckets go, they're pretty enormous. With the cop-outs, you got people who think they don't have what it takes for some reason or another, and Jacobs tries to get granular here to really alarming results.
Maybe their parents told them they couldn't do it. Maybe their parents said, "You're stupid, you dummy. Why don't you be more like your mom? Why don't you be more like your dad? You're just silly, you're just stupid, you're dumb." And maybe they've convinced you are dumb.
With holdouts, you've got people who could be successful but just don't want to try. He spends a pretty ludicrous yarn here about him being a star football player in 8th grade, but he moved with his parents that year and for some reason didn't play football for reasons that he can't quite articulate. The message of that story being, of course, that he could throw a football 50 yards when he was 12.
When I was in 8th grade, I could throw the football about 50 yards. And I was good at football. But I never will forget, my parents moved, and I got to a football field, the new school I was supposed to go to. I was in the car, ready to get out, and I saw all the guys out there playing football. And I started thinking, wait a minute, what if they reject me? Now wait a minute, what if I blow it?
Then you've got dropouts, which are people who give up when the going gets tough, even though they have the potential for greatness. And here we have another excuse for John Jacobs to talk about how great he was in high school, like he's some proto-Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite.
That happened to me too. Because you see, when I was lifting weights, I lifted weights for about a year. I can be great at lifting weights. I can do it. I can bench press more than any teenager in my high school ever has.
Back in '82, I used to be able to throw a pigskin quarter mile.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountains?
In fact, this whole spiel as a rallying cry against teen suicide is pitifully useless. It doesn't seem to be designed to engage on the level of the people who are contemplating suicide or feeling depressed about their lives. It seems more designed to reinforce the self-image of the people who already see themselves as living a good life or being on the righteous path.
Because you see, the thoughts you think is the person you are. And suicide comes from the thoughts you think.
It makes it seem like the answer goes something like this. Are you sad? Well, you should try being happy. But what is that righteous path? Jacobs oddly doesn't say. He doesn't even hint. Because at the end of the day, this video wasn't designed to give you the answer. I watched this through a couple of times to try to get what Jacobs was getting at, and then it hit me.
A crummy commercial? Son of a bitch.
This is just an ad. An ad for their school shows. I took another look at the tape itself. No mention of Jesus, no mention of God, no mention of any church connection whatsoever. This was Jacobs' best pitch for going into the schools because it so effectively hid the real pitch of his work. Take an easy, scary topic like teen suicide that appeals to schools who are wildly ill-equipped to deal with their students' mental health. Talk around it by just plugging in one of your off-the-shelf motivational speeches, and throw in a couple of the cheaper but flashy stunts your team can throw together in a cheap Dallas studio with little to no prep. Hire a sound team and some lighting guys, rent the cameras, you're in and you're out for a few grand and maybe 2 days of filming, depending on how many times you have to reset the ice blocks. Plug it onto 1,000 VHS tapes, send them to guidance counselors and assistant principals across the country, and your bait-and-switch conversion con is on, baby. It makes all of the mealy-mouthed wishy-washiness of John Jacobs' pitiful attempt at motivational speaking in this video make so much more sense and context, too. And the wild pirate jukebox of unlicensed pop songs. John Jacobs wants you to trust him, Mr. or Mrs. School Principal, because he's just like you, or maybe even a better version of you. I mean, look at his muscles. He and his muscly friends are cheery, confident, and energetic. He believes in you. He believes in your students. He wants them to be the best people they can be, and if they just come to the show after the one they'll put on at your school, if you'll have them, maybe they can even become even better people. The right kind of people. His kind of people. It's not motivational speaking at all. It's bait. Candy from strangers, a wolf in a muscly tracksuit. And if you need to be baited into faith, is that faith? Give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Turn a man into a fish, and he's dinner. Thank you all for watching Too Many Tapes. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also my new second channel, and hit the bell icon to get updates for when I upload videos. I tend to do a video a month. I know I'm obsessed with the power team, it's unhealthy, this probably won't even be the last of these videos. It can't be stopped. If you want to help out a small YouTube creator, consider donating $1 or more to my Patreon. Everything you give me goes directly into the show. Your funding finances my life-shattering VHS habits, so I hope you're happy with yourselves, but, not sarcastically. If you donate $20 or more a month, you are part of Corey's Extreme Strength Squad, which is legally distinct from the Power Team, John Jacobs' Next Generation Power Force, Team Impact, or any other traveling band of muscle folk, and you get to have your name in the credits in an enormous font like NATO Kitsch. You can also be like Mippa and have your name in an enormous font too. For $10 or more a month, You're the kind of school principal who booked yo-yo guys in the 90s, and your name gets to be pretty big in the credits too. And for $5 a month, you're not cop-outs, dropouts, or holdouts. You're all-outs, because you're the best kind of people apparently, and you get early access to my videos. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Too Many Tapes.
Shut up and sit down.
It's a hungry cobra I've made a tongue twister for myself on purpose